Hello vinyl community, it's Brad Vinyl Guy here. Thought I'd do a video to show my support for Andy's channel, Andy's 200 subscribers contest, and it's all about your 10 perfect albums. I know a lot of people have entered so far, Andy. I know you've got masses of subscribers as a result of you starting this competition, and last time I looked you were well past 300, so well done to you, Andy, congratulations. You're a really nice guy, you're a great artist, you got me to buy a book, which I never thought I'd do from the vinyl community. And yeah, I just enjoy your videos, so I want to show my support. It was a nightmare, absolute nightmare choosing my 10 favourites, and I literally had a sleepless night about this because I woke up in the middle of the night and remembered an album that I wanted to include that I'd forgotten originally. I had a short list of about 25 albums, knocked it down to 14, got to the 14, and knocking 4 out to get it down to 10 was, I don't know, I can't even begin to tell you. It was hard. It was really hard. And I had to really rack my brains, and you didn't want any honourable mentions, and it was, I've tried my best. So I hope my enthusiasm for the albums come across. I might come across a little bit more enthusiastic in this video than I normally do, because these are albums that are very close to my heart, albums that I love. They're the perfect albums, and that's what you wanted. I've never heard the perfect album with 10, 11, 12, 7, 8, 15 great songs on it. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, probably doesn't come across in my videos, but so I find it really hard to say something's perfect. And there might be that song that's on there that's not quite as good as the others, or isn't very good at all, but the rest of them are great. It's that kind of thing, and it's the best I could do. And I've not seen many of these videos, only 2 or 3. But I've heard somebody else say that as well, so I'm glad it's not just me. So anyway, don't want to witter anymore. We'll start with my first one, and these aren't in any order, you know, 1 to 10. It was hard enough getting it down to 10, so I couldn't put them in any particular order. But I want to start off with a group I love very much. This is Talk Talk, Colour of Spring. Could have chosen another couple of albums by them, but I've gone for this one, and that says a lot about their work and their body of work and how good I think they are, and how much esteem I hold them in. Right from the first track, Happiness is Easy, which features a children's choir. Who thought I'd like a song that had a children's choir on the back? Probably, well, you wouldn't, would you? But that's how good they are. It's an exotic album. It's got a whole range of great percussive instruments on it, as well as the post-rock sound that they're famous for, and this was probably their first of the post-rock albums that they did. Started off as a synth pop group. One of the few bands I was there from the start. My brother was a big influence on the stuff I used to listen to when I was a kid. He was 3 years older than me, and he brought Talk Talk home. He brought one of their very early singles, and that's how we got into them. Loved their first 2 albums, but when this one came along, it just blew us both away. I Don't Believe in You, Life's What You Make It was the big hit on here. Living in Another World was a minor hit, but that's here in all its glory, in its full 12-inch version that came out as well. The artwork's great on here. The artwork was fantastic on all the stuff that came out on this time. Beautifully drawn. If you don't know it, Andy, check it out as an artist. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. Give It Up, Chameleon Day, Time It's Time. 8 songs, 7 of them are just perfect, with the 8th one being very closely behind that. Just a great body of work. And it came with the lyric sheet on the inner instrumentation information on here, and label that. That's Talk Talk, The Colour of Spring. Next up, this is a sort of an album that I was really worried about when it came out. This is how much I care about music. I love this group dearly, but all the previous albums, always one of my favourite bands at the time, still are. And when this album came out, I was really worried because the first single that they brought out before the album came out was a real disappointment to me. They were going in a very dance direction when they were being very indie before, very innovative, and now they were sort of not getting on the bandwagon, but it wasn't as original as their early music had been. But how wrong I was. This is New Order, Technique. When I heard the first single, Fine Time, it sent me into a panic because I didn't like it at all, and that's the first song on the album. So, why is it the perfect album? Because the other songs on the album are perfect. Absolutely amazing. Other singles came off here, Run, Round and Round, But Dream Attack, Vanishing Point, Mr. Disco, Guilty Partner, Loveless, All the Way, all fantastic synth pop songs, indie synth, whatever you want to call it. Incredible. The lyrics, New Order aren't very strong in the lyrics department generally, but there's some really good ones on here. A lot of the songs are about a breakup, about lost love, and at the time I was just breaking up with a girlfriend that I'd been with for about 3 years, so the songs meant a lot to me from that point of view. But just musically, it's just magical, and this is one of the best songwriting teams, this band, in musical history for me. New Order, they're just amazing body of work. There's the inner and the label. Just a superb album from start to finish. Well, apart from the start. Yeah, New Order technique. Next, we're going back to 1979, so 10 years before that album for this one. Debut album by The Pretenders, self-titled. Chrissie Hynde, fantastic frontwoman. James Honeyman Scott, for me one of the most underrated guitarists of all time. Pete Farrington on the bass, Martin Chambers on the drums. Made 2 albums, I think, under this guys, The Pretenders. Sadly, James Honeyman Scott and Pete Farrington both passed away from drug-related deaths. James Honeyman Scott was only 24 when he died. Pete Farrington, not much older, I don't think. Obviously Chrissie Hynde was American, the other 3 guys were from Hereford in England. But an amazing combination of skills. Chrissie Hynde was a great songwriter. Obviously the first single was Stop Your Sobbing, then Kid, and then Brass in Pocket was a massive #1 here in the UK. I think this album got to #1 as well. It came out at the beginning of 1980. Now, one of the main reasons I probably like this album so much is because my brother bought it, and it was the first album he ever bought. So it could be one of those things where you just know the album so well, you're so familiar with it that you fall in love with it. It could be that, but I don't think so, because even when I've listened to it recently, say 2 or 3 years ago, still love it to bits now. I know all the songs like the back of my hand, like you would. You know, Chrissie Hynde sounds like she means it, you know what I mean? It's from the heart. She was angry, she was aggressive. You know, this is great post-punk songs on here, like Precious kicks the album off. You know, The Phone Call, Up the Neck. Some of the language is a bit fruity on here, but, you know, it's because she's angry, you know what I mean? She means it. Mystery Achievement, one of the greatest bass lines I've ever heard in my life. Private Life, later covered by Grace Jones. Kid, great single. You know, there's even a song on here about an arcade game, Space Invader, instrumental. Even that's kick-ass as well. So, you know, fantastic album. Real Records, 1979. It's the inner. And labelled. That's The Pretenders' debut album. The Pretenders. Next up, a band who've been talked about in very favourable terms recently in the vinyl community. Graham did a great video about this band, and we've talked about them before on here. And I've gone with the Cult's debut, Dreamtime. First album they made after they changed the name from Southern Death Cult. This is the album that comes with the free live album with it. 1983, I think, for this one. All the songs written by Ian Astbury and Billy Duffy, lead guitarist. Ian Astbury, the lead singer. It's just amazing. I mean, obviously all these albums are, but with this album, it's the way the songs fit together, especially at the start of side 2, where Gimmick and A Flower in the Desert, they're kind of, there's a very short gap between them, and it could almost be one song, even though they're very different in style. It could be a key change between them, but they just fit together so beautifully, and I find that a lot of the albums like that, and that's why I like it so much. Not only great songs, so you've got a couple of singles on here, Spirit Walker and Go West, but just fantastic post-punk, sort of very early goth, chiming guitar sound that I really, really liked at the time. Oh, excuse me, it's 1984 when it was made, not 1983. But yeah, amazing, amazing album. And they did an amazing run of albums throughout the 80s, right from this album all the way through to 1989 when Sonic Temple came out. And that's the Cult and Dreamtime. Next, big change in terms of style, but going back to 1978 for this one. Tough for me to pick an album by this band. Like I said before, honourable mentions are out, so I could have picked one of 3 or 4 albums by then, but this has always been my favourite. And this is The Man Machine by Kraftwerk from 1978. Now, the reason I've gone for this one is because obviously the standard of songs on it. The first album I ever heard by Kraftwerk was Computer World in 1981, and that's when I first started buying records, one of the first albums I ever bought, an album that I wanted desperately before I bought it. Loved Pocket Calculator, Computer Love, the couple of singles that had come off there, but it was really when I heard The Model that I really fell in love with them. Computer Love was a single here in the UK, and I flipped it when it had gone out of the charts and wasn't that successful, and put The Model out as a single. Now The Model had come out years before, 3 years before, in 1978. And it got me interested in wanting to hear this album. And my auntie worked in a catalogue warehouse at the time, and she said she could get all of the Kraftwerk albums for me, but I probably wouldn't like them because the songs on here weren't like The Model, and they're not pop songs and all that sort of thing. I said, oh, it's alright, I know I've already got one of their albums, and I love that. But then when I heard this album, I just thought this is just a different league to Computer World, as much as I love that album. I mean, the opening track, The Robots, Space Lab, Metropolis, as they pronounce it, The Model obviously, and The Man Machine are just amazing pieces of work. And they're the only band that I know can take a relatively simple melody and turn it into an 8 or 9 minute epic song, and the song sounds great throughout the 8 or 9 minutes, and that's all over this album. And yeah, people say that electronic music's soulless and there's drum machines and all that sort of thing, but this isn't soulless. I mean, Space Lab and Metropolis, they are not soulless songs at all. They hit you right here, and that's why I love the album so much, because they can make something out of something that's nothing. So that's Kraftwerk and The Man Machine, and that's the inner. Classic Kraftwerk photos and custom labels. Okay, so next, going from electronic into wild guitar. An album that I've mentioned before in one of my previous videos, and when I did the vinyl tag video, was the Pixies' Trompe le Monde. Now, a lot of people love Doolittle as their favourite album. That's probably the one most people turn to, but this one always did it for me. Bought this album not long after it came out. I originally had it on cassette, didn't have it on vinyl because vinyl was quite hard to come by when this came out in 1991, I think it was. And I wore the cassette out because I liked it so much. It's just genius. The way they combine the acoustic and electric guitars, Joey Santiago's lead guitar, the harmonising on the backing vocals, they're just magic. You know, just about everything they've done has been genius. But this album was where they hit their peak for me. It was their last album, and a lot of people thought they were past their best by this time, but I didn't think so. I mean, maybe that's another reason why I love it, because other people don't love it as much. I do know people who do love this album, though, to be fair, as well. But it's just covered with great songs, and I was talking about the Cult before and the way they fit songs together that go well together in parts of the albums. This does that all the way through from start to finish. So with the Pixies, you know, they do change key bizarrely in songs. So when one song goes into another on this album, you're not sure if it's the same song, or is it the next song, or was that part of that? You don't know, and that's part of the reason why I love it as well. So Distance Equals Rate Times Time, Right Way to Roswell, they're my two favourites on here. But Single Planet of Sounds on here, UMass, Palace of the Brine, Head On, which is covered later by Jesus and Mary Chain, Bird Dream of the Olympus Mons, Letter to Memphis. They're just amazing songs. All of those songs are brilliant on here. And it's probably my favourite album of all time. I say probably because I can't make it soon to save my life, but you know, it's a custom label. Beautiful. On 4AD, great label, great band, great album. What else can I say? That's the enough. Okay, so next, talking about wild guitars and unobvious key changes. This album, doesn't do that at all. Jesus and Mary Chain, Psycho Candy. The songs are simple, ridiculously simple, but it's the way the feedback covers the songs and the sound of the feedback that makes, and the way the feedback is put together and put on top of the songs is what makes the album so brilliant. Because you can talk about the Velvet Underground, you can talk about the pop side of the songs, the Beach Boys, all those sort of things, but it's the way the two are combined on here that's what does it for me. It's just a genius piece of production. All the songs are written by the brothers William and Jim Reed, and to me they were all that I liked about music. all sort of embroiled into one thing, because they were wild, they were rock and roll, the whole image, the leather jackets, the wild hair, the not saying a lot in videos, being a hard band to pin down, the wild dates, gigs that they used to do. You know, they'd walk off after 12 minutes because they weren't happy, or the brothers would have an argument, or they weren't getting on at the time, or something like that, whatever. But the singles on here, Just Like Honey, Never Understand, You Trip Me Up, my favourite. Yeah, they're simple songs, but they're just drenched in feedback. And no one else was doing that at the time. You know, The Hardest Walk was using a film soundtrack. They're just brilliant, brilliant songs from beginning to end. And I saw them live doing this album about 18 months ago in London, and they were just amazing still. They were even better than they were back then. So yeah, Jesus and Mary Chain, they've done other great albums, but Psycho Candy, their debut, is my favourite. There's the inner. I mean, look how cool they are, these guys. Come on. Doesn't get any better, does it? Sunglasses, leather jackets. It's all there. Blanco and Negro label in the UK. Fantastic. Next up, my favourite band. So what's my favourite album by my favourite band? It's Meat is Murder by the Smiths. A lot of people go for The Queen is Dead. That's not the album for me. This is the album for me because fantastic variation of styles. We've got What She Said, which is punky. We've got The Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, which is a ballad, acoustic guitar. We've got Meat is Murder, that's feedback drenched. We've got Barbarism Begins at Home, that's funk, disco, and other styles, all encompassed within the same album, all brilliant songs, pretty near perfect. I'm sure you'd agree if you like Smiths. You know, the songs here, the lyrics always with Morrissey, a lot of humour in there. You know, he's talking about the way he was badly treated by a headmaster at one of his schools, headmaster ritual. We've all been badly treated by teachers at times. You can identify with these things. We're so Ruffians, which is about fairs in the Manchester area, and there's always a stabbing at fairs. People always get murdered, injured. You know, the real nasty side of stuff. It's all discovered in here and talked about in here. Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. Very depressing. What She Said was, I smoke because I'm hoping for an early death. I need to cling to something. Who writes lyrics like that apart from Morrissey? The songs about the monarchy, Nowhere Fast, I Like to Drop My Trousers to the Queen. You know, again, great ballad on here, Well I Wonder, superb. You know, they can do all the styles, they've got great musicians. Andy Rourke, for me, one of the great bass players of all time. His bass line on Well I Wonder and Barbarism Begins at Home, amazing. There's the back. There's lyrics. Famous photo there on the front. And labels. And Rough Trade Records, of course. The Smiths, Meat is Murder. Okay, now here's a band that I fell out with after they made this album. Loved all their output pretty much up to this album. And this was the high point for me. Simple Minds, You Gold Dream 81, 82, 83, 84. This is one of the most amazing albums I've ever heard because of the style of it. I can't think of many reference points. Whenever I hear this album, and the first time I heard it was the year it came out, and I was obviously quite young then and I couldn't make the references to music that I can make now because I hadn't heard that much music at the time. But even hearing it now, I don't know where this stuff comes from in terms of the style, because you can't really pin it down, and that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. Obviously the songs are great and that's why I love it, but that's the thing that sort of leads me and brings me back to it over and over again. The bass is very sharp and upfront, which is what I love in an album, and that Derek Forbes, I think, was the bass player in Simple Minds at the time. And he was so creative, as were the rest of the band. The music, it was almost like jazz in style in terms of the way it was freeform and the way that it all fit together. So I don't know how, I've never really read interviews about how they made the music at this stage, or I didn't at the time and I haven't since. But they kind of just all bring it together with all the different styles and the ways of making music in a way that I've never heard before. Because the music doesn't go together, but it's all obviously in key and fits together. So it's a mystery to me, and the songs on here are just ridiculous. Sorry, it's very hard to see them in this light, the titles of them, but Someone Somewhere in Summertime's on here, Glittering Prize. you know, the big one was Promised You a Miracle, which is one of my less favourite songs on the album, but it's still a great song, and it's just a great album. King is White and In the Crowd. It's just an amazing body of work again. And they never repeated it afterwards. They did, you know, quite a lot of good songs after this, but in terms of albums, like I said, up to this album, they'd done other good albums, but after it, as albums, the albums weren't as good. But this is just an outstanding piece of work. And you'll be pleased to hear this is my last one. So cheers for sticking it through if you've got all the way here. Now, I'm surprised at how many of these albums are being influenced by my brother now that I'm looking at them and picking them out. But this was another band that he got me into, and this is a band I'm going to be going to see live in the near future, who split up a very, very long time ago. And this is a group called Skits, and this album, Absolute Game. I'm not sure I've ever seen them mentioned in the VC before. I'm sure they would have been by people whose videos I haven't seen, or before I started watching videos on here. But when this album came out in 1980, produced by Mick Glossop, who I will be talking about in my next video, I was just amazed. The album they did before this was fantastic, but this was like a miracle to me. And just everything from the artwork, beautifully carved in, marble sleeve, the songs. Again, like Talk that I mentioned early on, there's a chorus of children singing on the first song on side one. Bit of a coincidence. Circus Games, which was a single. Goodbye Civilian was another single, and Woman in Winter. But the guitar work on here by the late Stuart Adamson is just immaculate. I always thought they were influenced by Bebop Deluxe. Again, I hope people aren't offended who are big Skids fans in terms of the guitar style. But just the brilliant songs. I mean, Stuart Adamson and like I said, Richard Jobson, they were the main songwriters. Richard Jobson usually in control of the lyrics, and he liked to write about war, and there's a lot of war theme songs on this album. The Devil's Decade, One Decree, Hurry On Boys, Out of Town, Children Saw the Shame, and A Woman in Winter, which is quite a romantic song. But genius guitar, brilliant post-punk, you know, probably at its best in terms of an album for me. Again, like I said, a band that I loved earlier, who I'm going to be seeing live, like I said, Skids, The Absolute Game. I remember when it came out, the tagline, and it was the Absolute album, and you're thinking, oh yeah, right. But it was, and still is. Okay, so that's it from me. All the best to Andy. Keep it going. See you all soon. Take it care.